and you're left with a choice. So you're left with a choice in that moment is if your why was compelling enough, the reasons why you want to do it, it was compelling enough, you really have to look at that and say, do I want to continue on the path of finding health and recovery, or am I going to go back to the relationship?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we will consider a question that was proposed. Can two addicted people get sober together? We're going to presume that what is meant here is a couple, a romantically involved couple. I say we because, as usual, we have Parham Namatolo here, our therapist, and I forgot to introduce myself. I am Dr. B, and I just described the topic, and here's Parham.
Yeah, what's up everyone? So my name is Parham, grateful to be here. I do have a clinical background that's related to marriage and family therapy, so this topic is going to be right down my wheelhouse, and I'm also a specialist when it comes to addictions and addictive processes and relationship dynamics. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, hopefully helping a few people out that might be looking to see and find out if they can get sober with their significant other.
Let's get started. By the way, a little plug-in for Parham. All his info is below in the links. You can go ahead and check those out. Let's get started. So Parham, the question was, and we're going to assume they're talking about couples, and I have some thoughts on this, but I want your feedback. Can two addicted people get sober together? What would you say right off the bat if someone walked in, or over at Buckeye where you run, it's an outpatient treatment center, if someone just came in and asked you that, what would be your off-the-top answer from all your experience?
Off the top. So first and foremost, I believe in the possibility of human transformation. So I believe that all human beings, yes, even couples, have the ability to transform who they are and how they live their life. I mean, if that's not the premise I do everything in, then I really wouldn't believe in the things I do. So I do believe it's possible, but we have to look at the conditions of that dynamic. First and foremost, are both individuals at the same level of readiness and motivation to change? Because if one person really wants it and the other person does not want it, there will be a significant challenge with the treatment process, the aftercare, and the requirements to actually obtain and maintain sobriety. So what I mean by that is, let's say two individuals have found out that, hey, we need to change our lives around. We got to stop using because of our jobs, our families, our kids, whatever it is. One person has a severe desire to do it, and the other one kind of wants to do it for that person. That level of motivation, that power imbalance, or the motivation imbalance, it might work really well for the short run, but as soon as 10, 15, 20 days goes by, the individual with less motivation has a higher probability of going back to doing the things they were doing because they never really wanted it in the first place. So it's important to see, are both people on the same page, right? Are both people wanting the same outcome, the same goal? That's number one. Number two is, are there any patterns of codependency? Are there any patterns of growing up in dysfunctional homes that the relationship they're having is a repeat of what they've experienced in the past? Is there any underlying trauma, lack of trust, potentially domestic violence in the house that's existed? Are there any children involved? Are there any legal issues involved? Are there any health issues involved? So all of this stuff is really important because it's really hard to just want to do something and not look at the total picture. But to answer the question, yes, for this introductory part, I do believe that individuals can. I do believe that it's challenging because one of the most important requirements of getting sober is to really get to know self, to reconnect with self, to discover who you are and when you lost touch of self. And in order to do that, it's a lot of reflective work, it's a lot of insightful work, and it's primarily focused on the individual. So when you bring another person in, now all of a sudden it could be externally focused. Could be worried about what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're working on, what they're not working on. It takes away from that experience to fully dive in. So with specific boundaries, which we'll talk about, and specific ways to approach and address, there are ways to get through it, but it is challenging. So the first and foremost, the most important thing is, what's your why? Why does this couple want to do this at this stage of their life? And number two, what's the level of motivation and willingness?
I love your answer because you did what I could never do. You took a very complex problem, and for me, it would have taken me 2 hours because I would dig in, and you reduced it to the most fundamental, immediately concerning elements and answered it. Beautiful. Now I'll dig into the more deep stuff, which is already in the back of your head, but you're so much better at me distilling this stuff. My response is, I'm not sure, but I do agree with Parham. And the reason my response would be that is all the things Parham said, but let's dig into it a little bit. When did that couple get together? Before addiction or inactive addiction? If it's an active addiction, or even if it's before addiction, what were the mental health pathological processes that got them together? Again, I don't mention these, was there PTSD? Is there personality disorders? Is there anxiety, depression, codependency? If these factors were wrong in the first place, what are we aiming for? And almost more importantly, are they going to inhibit each other's recovery if there is codependency? If there is a personality disorder with one or the other that's impacting the decision-making process of that other person involved in the relationship? I think more often than not, the answers to what I just proposed and you pointed out so succinctly and beautifully is yes, which may potentially make it more difficult. And really, I think what I'm saying, if we're going to have a positive attitude towards this, is saying this at the final level. It's going to be harder for those two people to be on the same page in terms of readiness to move forward. Because as they move forward, and let's say one of them is, starting to get clean, let's say two of them start to get clean, now you got to deal with all those things that potentially got the two of you together in the first place. And I think it's a very, very convoluted, complex issue. In my experience, and you've probably seen more than me because you've been involved with intensive outpatient treatment much longer than I have. I was several years, sure, but you've had thousands more patients in that arena than me. Well, there was two couples that I can think of right now. Most of them were failures or walked off, broke off. There was personality disorders, there was borderline features, there was narcissism, which is another topic we may create a video on. The two couples I think of, one of them did amazingly great. They got together. There was addiction, serious addiction on both sides of the family. They were from Virginia. They went into rehab together. Eventually, when I met them, they had just gotten clean and they only dealt with me as an outpatient. And over several years, they really grew as a couple even more. Their children, one of them got a really fantastic job in the cybersecurity industry. The other one was a blue collar guy that was doing really well. They moved back to Virginia, raising the kids, and eventually, we said goodbye because they were in another state. There was one other couple, and I thought they were doing well, but they started business together, were doing amazingly, and they were my patients. Now it's kind of funny. I want to toot my own. I do want to toot my own horn. Yeah. They left my practice for a small financial challenge, which was I didn't take Kaiser insurance. And I said, okay, I don't recommend you guys switching. You should stay to me and pay the minimal once a month fee. They moved away, and several years later, the husband reached out. The wife had overdosed. Something had happened. The wife relapsed. She overdosed, and he is in worse shape, and because of that. And I almost didn't recognize him when I saw him. We've got him back on track, and he's rebuilding his life at this point. That's been my experience. And then a lot of the people I saw in outpatient and sober living, it just didn't mix and match. So my kind of knee-jerk thing is, how did you get to this place together in the first place? Was that wrong for all the reasons we discussed? And are you able to make it out of this together and build something in an already pathological society where most of our beliefs, most of our values, most of the things that we sort of reach out to in building our lives are false, delusionary, and fantastic anyway? Are you able to get to a sober-minded place together? Those are my thoughts. I don't know what you.
Yeah, no, it's those are great. Those are great examples, by the way. And I have seen, just so the audience knows, I have seen people that come in as a unit and they're able to overcome their addiction and actually have some success stories. The length of relationship's important. What's the context of the relationship? So if it's someone you've been using with for the past 3 months and you want to get sober together, you really got to look and see, why am I doing this? It's important,
And they were already using what they meant.
Yeah. Okay. And if it's someone you've known for 15 years, you got children together, the context is completely different. So I want to kind of distinguish those things. But the other problem is this. It's not really a problem, but this is something that could happen. So oftentimes when individuals get sober, a new version of them starts to come out. And I'm not saying if it's a good version or a bad version, I'm just saying a new version because they're experiencing life differently. And when you're with somebody and they're no longer using drugs or alcohol, what happens is you might not really know who the person is. You might not even like being around the person.
Even the person themselves don't know oftentimes who they are, and it's new to them,
that's
right?
Exactly
so
it.
now you're dealing with a second variable that's very complex.
Very complex. And oftentimes what happens is arguments start to happen because they're kind of just like, it's almost two strangers that are in a relationship with each other. And the common primary thing that they had outside the love or the care they had, that third person in the relationship, which was the substances, is no longer there. And they're really vulnerable. They're very kind of just exposed. And sometimes I have a hard time with that. So I've heard this countless times, I'm not even exaggerating. Sometimes they even tell each other, I liked you more when you were using. I liked you more when you were drinking. You know, it's a sad thing to say, but it also makes sense because they don't even know this person. You know, they just want to go back to what's familiar, what's comfortable, where the foundation was started, even if it's a completely unhealthy one. You know.
And so that's important. It was so you can't say, well, let's go back to that because we felt so comfortable there. It's unhealthy. Let me even be more direct about that. It was a fantasy, and fantasies are not sustainable, and we're already living in the milieu of a fantastic fantasy, even for those that are sober, and they all crash in one way or another. So that's really important, right? So I think we got something out of this. There's something very hopeful about what we just kind of drew out of this conversation. Yes, you can absolutely take on the journey of sobriety together as a couple. B, like all good things in this world, nothing is easy, and there's an incredible number of nuances and multiple factors that will dictate how this will go. Is that a good way to put this?
That's a great way to put it. And I'm going to add one last thing here. So for anybody out there that starts the journey with their significant other, and for one reason or another, the significant other says, I'm going to go back and I don't want to do this, right? And you're left with a choice. So you're left with a choice in that moment is, if your why was compelling enough, the reasons why you want to do that, it was compelling enough, you really have to look at that and say, do I want to continue on the path of finding health and recovery? Or am I going to go back to the relationship? Because here's the thing, your mind might be telling you, I can't leave my partner, I don't want to abandon them. However, if you abandon yourself by going back, you've also abandoned somebody. So it becomes a binary choice.
This is critical because I'm going to put this in another way, and it's not a stretch. To the extent that finding a loving, healthy, productive relationship is a real thing in this world. That's a topic for something else, and we can do that with Parham because he's an expert in these areas. I'm going to say this, which, I don't talk about myself too much on this podcast. I'm not a young guy, I'm not an old guy, but it took me a long time to realize something. You can't love or take care of anybody in a meaningful, productive way until you love yourself first. And I think that's what you're saying.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so we got something out of this. I hope so. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Me and Parham are going to be back shortly with another topic. And see you guys next time. Peace.
Thanks, guys.